You are scary. You are scaring me. I am scared. This is my scared face. You are scary. You are scaring me. I am scared. This is my scared face. And now I discover that all of that just went live.
Mm-hmm. You'll want to turn that one off. You don't have to keep that open. It's now broadcasting.
What do I do?
You just close that tab.
Now I just, okay. And now it's live streaming. Got it. So please behave yourself and no nose picking. Hannah?
No, I was about to.
Okay. But I am noticing that your hair looks completely awesome today.
Oh, thanks. You're completely awesome. I'm going offline now. I have 20 tabs open. I'm here. I'm here.
Okay.
I'm just not there.
Thank you. Thank you. But that's okay, because I'm going to let my friends in and they're going to keep me company. I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to the people. Oh, and I'm on YouTube. I have 2 minutes to go. So what am I planning to talk to you about? I'm planning to talk about my own school life. I'm planning to talk about my teaching life. Planning to talk about my tutoring life. And I'm planning to talk about my entrepreneurial life. A lot of life. I'm planning to discuss a lot of life. Okay, so I'm going to admit all. Good morning. Good morning, Alicia. So nice to see you again. Good morning, Mary Jane. How are you doing?
I'm in bed, I have to admit. So I'm all right. I'm okay.
Good, good, good.
But I have been awake for a while, but I've just been chilling.
Chilling is good. We believe in chilling. Good morning, Dee. I'm sorry we did such a Zoom dance this week, Dee. I decided you were teaching at 7 a.m. Blimey. Anita's joining us. This is such a lovely thing. Goodness me, it's 11 a.m. People are coming in. We're live streaming to YouTube. And this is a student in Dubai. This is our opportunity to launch a new program, which I'm calling Meet Our Members, because you guys know that I've been doing QT chats for a while now, and getting to know each of you has been just such a joy. And every time I discover that something's lovely, I find a way to share it with everyone. So Claire and I had a chat last week, and Alicia and I had a chat this week. MJ and I have had many chats, and so Dee and I, we've got another one booked in. So what I wanted to do was sort of launch this opportunity for us to each get to know each other. And I sort of feel like I'm at an unfair advantage because I get to know a lot about you in building Qualified Tutor and making sure that it serves properly. And I don't necessarily always tell you about me. And so I thought that the first of the Meet Our Members it's only fair for me to tell you my story too, with as much honesty and openness as you guys share with me. So can I just have a thumbs up if that's all right, and I'll get started? Great. Now, I, as you know, far prefer interactive sessions. So if I could invite you please to use the chat to ask any questions or make any points, and also use the chat to sort of reiterate or reflect on what you relate to. And then what I'll do is I'll only go for about 15 minutes and then I'll pause and maybe we'll do some questions. But I'll start off, like I will all of these sessions, by reminding you guys that we are all about being curious, generous, and reflective. And so that's how I'm going to share with you. And I'm going to do my best to say something new, because That's how we serve each other best, by sharing what's showing up for us new today. So I've just put down here on my notes that I want to share with you my school life, my teaching life, my tutoring life, and my entrepreneurial life. And I'm not entirely sure where we'll end up, but I think it's relevant to start with the aha moment that showed me that qualified tutor was necessary, and then I'll dial back from there. So in 2019, in the summer of 2019, my father passed away. And that was the biggest and hardest thing that's ever happened to me in my life, because you can see him up there. He was my best friend and my biggest fan, and made me feel like I was okay and could do anything. And when I lost him, I realized really deeply that when you have a parent like that, you never lose them, because really you're standing on them, you're built of them. And so a lot of the last few years has been a journey of finding that confidence within myself that I know he put there. So at that time, I was senior leader in a local girls' primary school. And it was a gorgeous school. It's a faith school. And I had a really specific role there because we delivered two curricula. We delivered the Jewish faith curricula and the national curriculum concurrently. And the Jewish curriculum was delivered all morning, and then the national curriculum was delivered in the afternoon. So although I was only responsible for half the curriculum, I shared a desk with my colleague who was responsible for the other half, and we had each our entire staffs. We overlapped with teaching assistants, but we each had our own teachers that we were leading and deploying. And because it was a faith school, it had a few really, really interesting nuances. The first thing was how everything was lined up behind the ethos. And that's something that I really, really learned from, that every decision was made really strongly based on, does this serve the ethos of this faith school? And that created a really coherent environment. And the closer we stayed to that ethos, the happier everyone was. And that was a really important learning experience for me. When I first started as a senior leader, I'd been out of the classroom for about 10 years. And I used to sit in assembly, and my colleague used to run the assemblies, and I used to sit, and first I'd practice every child's name. As you know, I'd sort of look at them, and then I'd start scrutinizing them. So I'd sort of in my mind pick them up and look at them and see, how have they changed since I last saw them? What's going on with them? Shoes, coats, hair bubbles, who are they sitting next to? Are they fidgeting? Do they feel comfortable? And then doing the same thing for the teachers. So that was a really interesting shift. When I learned that, it was wonderful to know the students really well, but it was even more effective to know the children really well. And the minute that it was even more effective to know the teachers really well, the staff. And that was a real seed change for me, when I realized that the most impact I could have was by supporting the adults who supported the children. And the more I could boost their well-being, and I used to do dopey things like bring fruit into the staff room. We were situated right above a Tesco's. So I convinced the manager that he needed to donate fresh fruit to us. So every Monday I'd come in with two massive Tesco's bags of fresh fruit, and they felt cared for, or bringing good resources to them. All of those things that you see me do now, that's where they all started from, because I had this really palpable notion that if I sent a teacher into the class feeling really well, that would spill over into the well-being of the children and the outcomes of the children. We had an Ofsted, and we did well in our Ofsted. And I called the governors in the throes of adrenaline, after the Ofsted, and I said, now I want a proper registered creche for my teachers. That was the leverage that was what I used that leverage moment for, because I knew, again, if I had a good creche, I would keep good teachers. And by keeping good teachers, I would be able to continually improve outcomes. And I was there for 4 years, and it really, really was the most glorious experience. But I needed a bigger challenge, and I didn't want to take on a big school because I didn't want to become a tough cookie. And there's a limit to how much change you can lead in schools without becoming hardened, jaded, tired. And we've all know it for ourselves. And I've spoken to so many colleagues who say the same. And at that time, I began to notice that it's possible to have more of an impact on school outside of school. And I began to really focus on no, I hadn't read Atul Gawande at that time, Alicia. I began to really focus on the school gates. You know, there's a weird dynamic at the school gates between the teacher, the child, and the parent. And in my case, it was really noticeable because it's a community school and most of the parents were my friends. And I had a child in 2 of the classes. So it was really, really enmeshed. And yet, at the school gates, everybody wears their hat. They wear their role really, really rigidly. I am the teacher and I will have my back straight and I will scowl. And I am the parent and I will look deferential and a little bit nervous. And I am the child and I am torn in between these adults, you know? And this sort of triangle of weird relationship. And you think about it, you think we all grew up in school. So really those dynamics are entrenched generations behind us of trust and authority and distance. And I had learned in all of those years, scrutinizing the children and the adults, that distance didn't serve us. Boundaries serve us, but distance doesn't. And so I looked for a place to focus on proximity and well-being and nurturing the adults. My eldest was in year 7 at the time. And for the first time, he was getting in trouble in school. And the reason he was getting in trouble was he was studying modern Hebrew and he couldn't understand the subject and he could not get on with the teacher and he started failing. And because the teacher did not have control of the classroom, my eldest kept getting into trouble. Now, my eldest is a lot of things, but he's quiet and well behaved in the classroom. And so I knew that something was going on in that classroom management situation and that he was getting it in the neck because of it. And I knew that it was beginning to erode his self-confidence. So I realized that the best lever was to find a tutor. And at that time, finding a modern Hebrew tutor, I had 2 options. I could either ask somebody locally, and I had some funny feelings about that because the people I knew locally who taught modern Hebrew were not necessarily the people that I wanted to work with. And the prices were double what they should have been because of this sort of paying a premium for a local tutor. Felt like a sort of captive audience. So I looked online, went on SuperProf, and I found umpteen Hebrew tutors too easily. And that's where I started noticing how hard it was to have the safer recruitment in tutoring that you do in teaching. Because as a head teacher, I was so rigorous about who I brought in, because once I brought them in, I wanted them to stay. I wanted them to be amazing humans, who'd be a role model, who'd respect our ethos, who'd really bring the whole feeling of the school forward. And yet I didn't know how to do that when I was choosing a tutor for my eldest. I did find a gorgeous tutor. His name is Josh, and he went to Oxford and then to Harvard. And he served in the Israeli army in the intelligence section department. And then he came back to do an MA in Middle Eastern studies. He was a gorgeous, gorgeous young person and such a great role model. And I was glad that I had all that experience to be able to find that person. So I started noticing this discrepancy with 2 of my hats, with the mummy hat and the school leader hat. And then I dialed right back and I remembered my own life as a tutor. Now, most of you guys know I have 5 children, which means a heck of a lot of maternity leaves, which is why I was out of the classroom for so long. But in stints during that time, I did a lot of tutoring. I did small group tutoring, I did one-to-one tutoring, I did daytime tutoring where the parents would bring the kids out of school to my home for a sort of intervention and then send them back again with the understanding that a lovely hour with me would boost their confidence, boost their attainment, and was worth the slapping that it involved for the parents, because that meant the parents doing an extra round of school run a day. It was really lovely. And I still see some of those students now, because it's, you know, again, it's community. And it was lovely, but it was hard. And if you ask me about my memories from those times, I will tell you about feeling insecure and standing in my kitchen. Do you know this story already? Because you've seen the first draft of the book. Standing in my kitchen and looking out the kitchen window. Baby was sleeping upstairs, waiting for the next student to come in, and feeling crippled with insecurity. And that insecurity was coming from professional loneliness, from a lack of colleagues, a lack of, yeah, you're doing this right. So when I qualified as a teacher, I did 1 year in the classroom, and then I went off and had babies. And in between, I took a role managing a nursery, which was a stunning job, because early years is the best place in the world. And I did all these different small and different routes parallel to teaching, but I didn't run a classroom until I went back as a school leader. So I'm a bit of a weird, I have more experience in leadership than I do in classrooms. And that's why you'll see me often asking other people to deliver training instead of me, because I like to know what I know and what I don't know. But I think what I wanted to share with you there was that when I remembered that insecurity, I wanted to put an arm around myself back then. Yeah. So I was a young mum, and I was a qualified teacher, and I had a smile on my face, and people wanted to send their kids to me. And I felt really unsure, and I didn't have anyone to turn to. And so looking back then, 10 years later, my kids are teenagers, had all this years and qualifications in school leadership. And I just wanted to go back in time and put my arm around myself. So that was that moment when I'd lost my dad, and I got that chance to go back in time and give to myself. And building Qualified Tutor was that. It was, and every time I hear you guys tell the story, it's another version of the same story. The limitations are so much about the systems or the lack of systems. And the limitations are so much about us as gentle, honest humans, finding what does and doesn't work in those systems. And again, I know all of your stories, and I know each one of your breaking points. So when I was a little girl, I was a good student, and I was like one of those dolly kids that you put down, and when you went back, they were still there, you know. My mother said that I was like such a good baby because she never heard from me. And I'm thinking to myself, that is not what that's supposed to look like. I realized recently, I had myself diagnosed recently with ADHD. I had an assessment, and yeah, I passed with flying colors. And I think what I noticed in all of those years was the masking that girls participate in. You know, you go to school, you're a good girl, people smile at you, they brush your hair, your shoes are shiny, you participate, you do what people expect from you. And then there comes a point where you realize that it's not necessarily serving your happiness, serving your truth. And it's not necessarily coming from the right place in them either. So I have this sort of strong pull against compliance culture now, because my kids are cracking in the school system. My eldest just finished his A-levels. Number 2 hasn't been to school for 6 months, hasn't been attending school regularly for 6 months. It's a work in progress. He's 15. My 14-year-old, I moved her school and she's cheered right up, which was nice. My 11-year-old is transitioning from year 6 into year 7, which is terrifying, because you sort of have to say goodbye to them at that stage. You know, they stop being a baby and everything changes, and they push against you, and they're supposed to, and that's scary and hard. And the little one's still the little one, and I just want to hold on to her as long as possible, but she's her own person. So what does school look like for them? What do I wish it looked like for them? And how can I contribute to make it better? How can I use my life experience of journeying, making choices, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, feeling wobbly, lacking confidence, building myself up? How do I take those life experiences, which really come down to resilience and positivity and character building, which are all the things that we want our kids really to learn? Where do I put my shoulder? That was my question. Where do I put my power to contribute to the change that needs to happen? And so that's why I nurture tutors. And that's why this quality mark that will teach parents how to ask tutors the right questions, which will teach tutors how to set themselves up properly. Not to be regulated, but to be successful and sustainable, to be confident. I stopped tutoring because I lacked confidence. It just cracked. Couldn't do it to myself anymore. Yesterday, I met with a few really interesting people, and one of them said to me, how are tutors going to sustain their careers beyond AI? And like, we know that AI can't do the human bit, and that the best thing we can do is be more human. But that whole process is so intense and so heart-led and so exhausting, and takes such honesty. And then parents say to you, well, what did you do today? And what are the outcomes? And how do we measure progress? And yes, because they're investing money. And the progress and the attainment is so far beyond academic outcomes. So it's a complex and interesting space, and it's shifting all the time. So I'll just share with you one more thing, which is when I first decided to support tutors, I thought the first thing to provide was training, because I was delivering a lot of training in my school, lots of induction, lots of support, coaching. And I thought that, teacher development is all about continuous professional development. So let's provide training. No one trains tutors. Let's give them an introduction to pedagogy. I wrote a course that I'm still proud of today. But it didn't sell like I thought it would. And Ludo and I spent years knocking on doors, selling tutor training. And what we found was immense apathy and complacency. I don't have to train my tutors, and so I won't spend the money, was the bottom line. And there were only a few outliers who said, I know I don't have to, but I feel a moral imperative to support them. And those continue to be the outliers, because if I continue to knock on doors today and sell tutor training, they'll say, well, we do it differently. Well, our interview process is really rigorous. Well, we don't really need to. But what we found was that it's community and membership and events and coming together, and this concept of raising standards as a shared vision that makes all the difference, because it makes us each feel that we're part of something bigger. And training is an awesome thing, but the problem is that it has a beginning and an end. So it never really helps us to find our place in an ecosystem. Yeah. So what we're building now is an ecosystem for tutors. And there's space for everybody's stories in there. And there's affirmation in hearing each other's stories. So I'm going to pause, and I'm going to invite you guys to sort of unmute, share your reflections, ask you your question, tell me what resonated, all of those things. Anita, can you unmute?
Yeah, I think for me, it was that moment where you were talking about just feeling a little bit lost and a little bit scared about things and how that looked for you. And I think for me, I can completely understand that, because I think being part of the system certainly when you go back, I found that going back into the system as a mum, I didn't know where my role was anymore. I just felt pressure, a huge amount of pressure. And it just felt like the pressure was coming from all angles. And so it didn't seem to matter how much you did, you never kind of felt like it was enough. And so it was, the decision for me was just needing to take back control. And that was my decision to come out and do things by myself, but definitely resonate with that, because that was a tough moment where you think you've got a lot to give and a lot to share, but you don't really know how valued you are at that point, because you just seem to be a number at that point. And those years of experience don't necessarily count in the same way. So yeah, it's a bit eye-opening. So yeah, making the decision to come out was the right thing, 100%. But it's sad. It's also, there's a bit of sadness. You know, I think I've shared with you before, there's a bit of guilt around kind of making that decision as well. But you know, I'm a lot happier now. So I think that's, and I think you're right. When you are happy as a teacher, as a tutor, you bring that energy to your classes, to your students, and your students benefit at the end of the day from that, because you've got a lot more to share with them in a much more positive manner. So they all benefit. So yeah.
I tell you the truth, I feel guilty every time I drop my kids off at school. It's a lovely school and my kids are happy there. I feel guilty when I look at the teachers, because I do feel like I jumped ship.
Yeah, that's so difficult. It's so difficult to kind of let go of that. Yeah, it's still there, isn't it? It's even, and it doesn't matter what you do in your role, how hard you work in your role for the students you work for, you still know that there's a choice there. Those students are choosing to come to you, whereas in school there is no choice, and that's the big difference, isn't it?
That's something that really resonated with me, where you said that you're just a number, and I think about myself as a little girl, and how we were to a certain extent all treated as numbers moving through a system, and when the numbers graduate from the system, they go back into the system as staff, and the sort of the machinery of that is quite stark. It's quite hard to swallow that that's really what's happening with all of our children moving through these systems.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, I think what you're doing is phenomenal. It really is. It's just, it's giving people, I think being part of this helps to make you feel like you're still, you know, you're still part of something that is about standards, that is about quality. It's not just about running a business for the sake of running a business or making money. There's a lot behind it that makes it so much more credible, and that's it's amazing. So grateful to be here.
I really appreciate that. And whilst we're on the subject, I think what you're doing is amazing also. And I think, you know, if you think about that sort of what I used to do in assembly, you know, looking at every child and every teacher, that's what I do here.
Yeah.
And that's, I think that's where that's what really gets it. That's what helps us to really do it right, get the feel right, contribute properly. And it's difficult. It's, you know, I put down here that I wanted to share the entrepreneurship journey, and I don't like to be a downer, but it's really hard. It's so hard. And until I had Odette sitting next to me, I was meandering, and I would have lost my path. I would have lost energy. I would have not got where I needed to get to, because I was meandering. And Odette mopped me up off the floor last year, and she works next to me, and she brings all her muscle. I tell you, I had a very, very horrible meeting about my son who's struggling with attendance, and it was one of those meetings where all the team gang up on the parent at the same time, which is, you know,
wow,
lovely, yeah. And I was afterwards, and she physically picked me up and held me like a straitjacket, and she said, absolutely not, I am not letting you go there. And I feel like that's what we need to do for each other, because my mum doesn't know how to do that, because she doesn't know that the system's wrong. She doesn't have enough knowledge of the system to know how wrong it is. And it's only us who are not employed by the system anymore, and therefore have the freedom to choose differently. It's only us that are able to say yes this and no that.
Yeah, and definitely challenge what, certainly for me, it's about challenging the way that kids see themselves and how they, this whole thing. I mean, it's difficult as an adult to not compare yourself. I'm still guilty of it.
Aren't we all?
Yeah, it's tough. It's really tough. But I do think that having those conversations with kids when they are young and really reinforcing it to them, I didn't hear enough of that when I was a kid growing up. And I think, they need to know that it doesn't matter about where anyone else is or what anyone else is doing. They've got to have that peace in their own heads about where they are and who they are and how they're doing in life. And it's I think that's super, super important.
I think the idea of challenging those self-beliefs is exactly the right place to put your intervention, because what we can't do is shadow box the whole system, right? We have to be really intentional about where we put our efforts, and going right into the child's mindset has got to be one of the most powerful places to put your efforts.
Yeah, but you get as well that it's just so difficult to do that when you've got a class of 30. That's the other thing, isn't it?
I just saw in my kitchen, I've got a certificate floating around because my 8-year-old finished a PSHE program. So she got a certificate. And I thought to myself, you know what I mean? Like, she participated in some activities that is not the same as actually the personal development that should have, there's no certificate for that. I get the same thing. I don't know if you've seen this, if you felt this as well. I got a report for her, the end of school report, and they said, she's a lovely girl and she's so bright and she behaves so beautifully and she has so much to contribute to the class and she's a good friend. And I thought to myself, I'm really glad you know that too. Like,
yeah.
That's all the report did for me. I know who she is. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only benefit of this report is that I see that we're aligned about who this child is, and I'm pleased that you see her. Mm-hmm. But there's so much autonomy that we hand over as parents when we hand our children through that school gate, and we forget that we, there's that mentality that you see in schools of, don't worry, Mrs. Silver, we'll take care of it. And I think that we have all been raised to be followers instead of leaders.
Yeah.
Claire, jump in, go on.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the talk there of the support that you're mentioning, and about it not just being the children that need that support, but the teachers and parents and everybody. And it struck me, I remember my last school I was in, and I don't know, I'm presuming this is across many schools, the what went well and even better if. And there always has to be an even better if.
Yeah.
And I came away from that as, I will never be good enough.
Exactly.
So as a tutor, yes, there has to be that little bit of even better if, or else what are we in it for? But as a tutor, I will often say to my students, that's really good. Yeah. And leave it at that.
Yeah.
And you don't get that as a teacher. I have such admiration for what teachers do, because I couldn't do it. I did it for 4 years and I was at breaking point, because I found, maybe it was just me, but I found that you only heard from parents when things weren't going right. You only got criticised, or you only heard from your line manager because you needed to improve. And that support is something that I do get from your organisation that you just didn't get, or I didn't get when I was a teacher. And I know that I wasn't the only one.
Yeah, yeah. I learned from Jack, and if you've not attended Jack's sessions yet, you absolutely must, because they'll change your life. I learned from Jack how powerful it is to say yes and instead of yes but. And that element of what went well and even better if is the yes but, because it's always pulling the rug out from under your celebration, right? Whereas an and is more of a, you know, building or a pathway or a journey, but it's not taking away from your achievements. And I think that that's quite a helpful mindset. And that, you know, Claire, every time I think of you, I look at you, I think of the red button. Would you tell them about the red button? It's such a good one.
I worked in a school that, well, I worked in 2 schools, and in both schools, Ofsted came in on my first day. In the first school I worked in, they got a serious weakness, and it wasn't the leader that was removed, but the next one down. They brought in a new person, and he brought in a red button system where if any children misbehaved, you press the red button and someone would be at your door. The child would be removed from the classroom. It was actually a good thing because you felt supported, but the child was removed, and then any discussion whether what you'd done was right, whether the child had done something right or not, was done later. But that meant that you could get on with your teaching. But I was saying to you, it was a maternity contract. And so that came in, and I left the school 3 months later. But that little bit of support where it was, you're supported in that moment, we'll sort out later what the issues are, was brilliant. And I could probably still have been a teacher if I'd stayed at that school, even though it got serious weakness.
Isn't that amazing? I think that red button, because I'm thinking about it from the child's point of view as well. And I'm thinking, at least he didn't get yelled at in the classroom. At least nobody tore him down and had an argument or performed, you know, disappointment in front of the whole class. That sort of short, sharp, it's a management tool, isn't it? It's not education, but it's just effective management. So we have a crazy puppy in our house, and I'm told that she's now an adolescent because I really needed another teenager around here. If I tell you, I came home yesterday and I thought, blimey, if the kids put the dishes away, I couldn't see a single dirty dish on the counter. Do you know why? She'd licked them all clean.
Yeah.
She had licked the bolognese off every single plate. There was no evidence of what they'd had for dinner. So my awesome puppy trainer, who I don't bring into the house enough, she said to me, first thing you need to do is put the dishes away. Yeah, you just need to put the dishes away. And you think it's not education, it's just management. But the more that you can head those things off at the pass and set people up for success, the better the systems go, because you don't live in a shouty world, you know, where people just yell at each other because things weren't planned properly. I'm going to wrap up this session soon, but I'm looking forward to doing this with each of you guys. And so I'm going to send out the link for the QT conversations. Dee, I do think, are you booked in for next Thursday? Sorry, my darling, it's not next. It's alternate, because Hannah's doing one and then I'm doing one. So in 2 weeks' time.
I don't think I could find a date.
Okay, I will have another look.
There wasn't anything in the Calendly link that I could.
Awesome,
there weren't any available days.
Well, that's exciting. So I will book you in as soon as I can. But I think that this opportunity for us to get to know each other and I'm glad I got the opportunity to go first, because I think that's healthy. So is there any other sort of closing thoughts, insights, suggestions before I wrap this conversation up?
Sorry, because I haven't put the calendar in. Is it every other Thursday?
Every other Thursday. Hannah and
every Thursday, sorry.
MJ,
sorry.
There is an event every day of the week at 11 o'clock.
Well done.
And
Yeah,
Thursday.
Two texts. It's just about to come to an end.
Yeah.
Did he bring us peaches? Did he bring fruit?
So I'm having my boiler serviced,
Oh, they come and do mine.
and
So,
it needs it needs a bit now, and then the boiler manufacturers have got to send an engineer next week to fix a different bit.
oh, excellent. That sounds efficient.
It's only 5 years old.
Yeah, should we talk about their carbon footprint, shall we? The last piece, MJ, to explain it to you, Hannah and I are alternating on Thursdays. She's doing community Q&A, so you can ask questions about how to make use of all the benefits that we're laying on, that people tell me are overwhelming, and these QT conversations. So we'll take turns each week between me and Hannah, and that will give you a chance to do all the troubleshooting technical stuff. How do I find my discount for insurance? Those questions, and these in-depth, fluffy, deeper meaningfuls. I wanted to let you know that I've got a few changes and launches and amazing things coming up. And the more I tell you about them, the more comfortable you'll be when they happen. So the first thing is the QT Awards are coming, and they're going to knock your socks off. And they'll be launched in the next few weeks, and they are a supportive program for you to evaluate and level up your practice. And yes, you will get a pretty award. It is my answer to all the awards that happen in the summer that tell people that they are the best and tell everybody else that they are not the best, because that's not how education should work. Yeah, anybody who reaches a threshold should jolly well be celebrated for it. So these are the QT Awards, and I hope that they've got legs. I also hope that they teach parents how to choose you. The next thing is the QT chartered route. So the chartered college units are really high level. They're a level 7 program. There's 4 units. Andrea will be delivering them, and they give you a chance to focus on evidence-based best practice in your subject. Open-ended essays, debates, lots of different tools to help you to fly in your pedagogy. It's only for the biggest tutor nerds out there. And I will be making sure that you're a good candidate before I let you on the course, because I want to set you guys up for success. The next thing is the community will be closed to non-members by January. And that's a really important change that will create this safe space for us. So I'll give tons and tons of warnings so that all the people who are involved but don't speak up don't get left behind. But I really want to create this safe space for QT members. I think that's it. Well, there's lots more, but that's enough. Thank you for your time, my lovely friends. Thank you, and I appreciate your encouragement. Cheers, Alicia. Cheers, MJ. Cheers, Claire. Cheers, Dee. And thanks, Anita. Thanks, God, for popping in. And thank you, Hannah. You're the best. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.